Welcome. Today we're featuring a video called Beginning Sewing, and in doing that the goal is to go back to basics. Don't get me wrong, beginning sewing doesn't really mean that you're just a beginner sewer. The reason I titled it that is simply because there's many things that we learned as we started to sew that we learned from maybe maybe a source who didn't know, maybe a source who thought that particular thing they were teaching was the better way. As you know, so much of our information is fragmented, and I wanted to kind of pull it together and offer you the best possibility of the education that I had through the years, and hopefully that would benefit you in your personal sewing. So all of these things are coming from Beginning Sewing, and the things I'm mentioning, I'm going to mention 6 things today. They are really all about logic, and they're to help you move and have more success in your sewing than ever, and to enjoy the process more, I think. And also to be aware that you can do this. It's a really simple, fun process. I don't think any of these things are things my mother taught me. My mother is the one who taught me to sew. But that doesn't mean they're not good or bad, because I've learned plenty that my mother taught me. So for Mother's Day, I guess that's what inspired me to go back to basics. It's really just to embrace good information and see if it works better for us. And if it doesn't, and if what we're using right now currently works better, then we stay with what we've got. All right, that's the goal. So these 6 things, let's start with markings on a pattern. Keep in mind that when I'm doing a pattern first time, I should always be doing a muslin. I know you guys have heard me say that over and over and over. So I'm transferring markings from the tissue to the muslin. And anytime I'm doing that, we have so many marking tools over the years, and I think most of them are a little bit antiquated. Get a Sharpie. And if you take a Sharpie, and I've got just 2 layers of tissue, and if I just take it and press it down on one layer, what does it do? It goes through to the next layer. Or it goes through to anything. It goes through to your fabric. It goes through to anything underneath it. But if you notice, it doesn't disintegrate the tissue at all. It doesn't harm it. It doesn't hurt it. It doesn't put little holes in it. It doesn't tear it up. So by using a Sharpie marker to transfer those markings from the tissue to the muslin, then once they're on the muslin, I can use my muslin as the pattern and then go from there. And I can either clip the edges of a dart, I can use a pin to do the middle, but they're much less when I'm making it the second time, because there's things I know about it than when I'm making it the first time. All right, so that's marking. That'll help you with your marking tools. The second thing, and the reason I picked these 6 is I get lots of emails, and I love your emails, I love your comments, and yet sometimes when I get them, I realize that there's information that's lacking prior to the question being asked. So a question I get a lot is, how can cotton, and in the video we talk about the difference between cottons and wovens, knits and wovens, first names and last names of fabric. And in this particular case, what we get is I get a lot of questions about, how can knits stretch? No, sorry, I'm not saying that right. How can cottons stretch? If cotton is not a fiber that's stretchy like Lycra, how can I have 100% cotton fabric that has stretch to it? And so first off, I'm going to burn a little section so you can see what cotton burns like. There's 100% cotton, and you know by the fact that when you first light it, cotton will burn. There are some fabrics that will not burn, and it has a nice, kind of a slow, steady burn to it, if you'll notice. Orange flame, white smoke. When I go to blow it out, white smoke, that's cotton. Also, you'll notice, if I open it up a little bit, how it just loves to burn. It just wants to keep on burning. It doesn't go out right away. It has a really pretty continuation around it. And so almost with cotton, you kind of have to think of paper burning. It's really kind of, similar to it. Although cotton is a natural fiber, and it'll just have that really nice. But you see, it's 100% cotton. There's no rough edges. There's no poly. There's no anything that is stretchable as a natural, as a fiber, like your Lycras and your all the things that they put in there are all polyesters. And so if they're in there to make it stretch, you'll feel that hardness. So now we've determined that this is 100% cotton, and when we go to stretch it, that fiber is just twisted, and the higher the twist and then the bigger the loop, that's what creates the knit, the stretch of the knit. It has nothing to do with the yarn itself. So I can take any yarn, 100%, and make any fabric out of it, as long as the weave is there that will give that stretch what it needs to have. So I can have 100% cotton that does anything I want. I can have 100% silk stretch. I can do all of those things. The fiber and the end result have nothing to do with each other. I can do any of those. Okay, I hope that clarifies. I do not have to have Lycra in a fabric for it to stretch. Okay. Finished garment measurements. What we need to understand is why we need finished garment measurements. When we are duplicating what we like, we have to have a base to go off of. And because every garment we wear maybe differs a little bit, not every garment, but a knit top from a blouse, from a jacket, because each one of those differs, we want to know, what do I like my t-shirts at? Or, you know, what are the 2 things, or what are the 5 things I like my t-shirts at? And what do I like my jackets at? So for each project we start into, we want to think about, how do I want it to be on me? What do I want to wear under it? Do I want it to be the outside layer? And once I know that, then I have a finished garment measurement. And I can pick out the size by a finished garment measurement. I think many of us are really hung up on size. And that size, I must go into that same size every time. That's kind of a guide. That's a circumference issue. And so don't cling into that too hard. And please, on our website, under in the features page, in the middle column, there's a paper or a kind of a Excel spreadsheet, sort of, we've made for you. It's called Finding My Measurements, or Finished Garment Measurements. So if you'll go to features on our website, features center column, and print out that page, you can literally write in what you like your measurements to be. All over the place, finished garment measurements. You cannot pick out a pattern by your bust measurement, because you don't know what the final garment is going to be. And if you're not understanding this, watch more of other of our videos, and we go over it extensively. But again, because we have come so far and there's so many new people, I worry that a lot of people don't understand what this finished garment measurements, really the impact of it, and how for many of us at Silhouette Patterns who are sewing with it, it's been life-changing. But for many of you who still don't quite understand that, it can be very worrisome in the beginning. All right? All right, when I'm cutting out, what I want to do is I want to make sure that my cuts are cross-cut. So anytime I come to the edge of the pattern, and if I have the pattern laying down on my fabric, I'm going to cut. I'm going to take my scissors out, and then I'm going to start the other direction. And so that I get a nice sharp corner every time, because my cutting has crossed. So every once in a while, take your scissors out, let the fabric and pattern relax back together, it's weighed down, and then do cross cuts. Best, most effective thing ever. Templates, armhole templates, you need them. I don't care whether you buy them from us, but make them yourself, it doesn't matter, but you need them. Because it's the simplest, quickest way to to take a jacket pattern and make it a blouse, to make a blouse pattern and make it a t-shirt, to make a t-shirt pattern and make it a blouse. You can just go all over the place with this. And so to have these templates, I need a sleeveless armhole, I need a t-shirt armhole, I need a blouse armhole, and I need a jacket armhole. And again, you know what, I have to say, this was my mother's. This was an idea from my mother. Not that she used templates, but she did tell me in the early years, as we talked about patterns, she didn't have a lot of pattern knowledge, but in the early days, all of the patterns had the same armhole size. So you could take this sleeve from this and this and this. And this is kind of the same concept, is that you want all your t-shirts to have the same armhole size. You want all your blouses to have the same armhole size. Clearly there's a few exceptions from that, but for most of it you can go much faster and much quicker if you have the same armhole size. All right? So understand that I need a knit, a woven blouse, a woven jacket, and of course a sleeveless. And when you have that, you'll quickly go from one item to another, and you can use patterns all over the place. You can really mix and match them quite a bit. The last thing I want to talk about, the sixth thing I want to talk about, is stitch length. Boy, we had a lot of controversy about stitch length. I can always use a straight stitch. When you're sewing on knit, you guys want to do a zigzag. Again, I'm factory based, and that's where a lot of my education comes from. And to me, if they're making 10 million of them, that's good enough for one for me. But that's my thinking, and I can understand that you don't want to go there. So some time ago, my son, we were moving a refrigerator, and my sons were all around helping, and there's like a little mechanism on the very top of the refrigerator. It's what holds the door in place. And as he was bringing his hand down, he caught the cuff of his shirt on that mechanism. And his cuff just tore right off. Not all the way, but the segment that got caught. It just tore completely off. And I heard it, and then I looked at it, and I was relieved to see that the fabric wasn't harmed at all. No fabric was torn, nothing. It literally caught, and when it caught, what gave way was the seam. So I could quickly take the shirt, go repair it, and give it right back to him. No harm done. That is a perfect thread stitch length. When the garment, if stress is put on that garment, the thread will release and allow the fabric to be preserved. I want you to think about it in that way. So I have a shirt I've made, and when I take this shirt, based on the fabric, I can pull it apart. And you can see as I'm pulling, the thread is popping, and that's what I want. I want the thread to release and the fabric to be preserved. So that means my stitch length is going to change a little bit. If I'm using a really lightweight fabric, I'm going to need a longer stitch length, because otherwise my fabric will tear and my stitching will be beautiful, and that's not what I want. I want my stitches to release and my fabric to be preserved. So I always say I stitch at 3.5, and that's kind of, you know, a generic thing. When I come to a fabric that's very stable, that's very dense, that's going to be like my pants, I'm going to shorten that stitch length up a little bit, maybe to 3.0. And if I'm dealing with a really loose fabric, I'm going to take it up to 4.0. And that's really a range. But don't think it's always based on the same. It's really, and if you leave it at 3.5, you can have it there forever. But recognize that with some of the garments I'm making, I'll want to change up that stitch length for reasons of the fabric. The fabric is the winner, the fabric is the leader, and the fabric is the reason I make those choices. If on a knit, if I'm sewing a knit and my stitches are popping for any reason, it's because my stitches are too short. And when they're longer, they can give and then they can relax back to where they should be. They'll stabilize the knit. That stitching will stabilize that knit and hold it in place. But if they're too short, the knit can't do what it's supposed to do, which is stretch a little bit. All right, so those are my 6 tips, back to basics. Beginning sewing, it really isn't about beginning sewing. It's probably beginning information that we should all have. Hopefully that will help you get simplify some of the things you do. And the goal, of course, always is to have happy sewing.